The storm rolled over the mountains like a beast unchained, thunder cracking the sky, rain hurling against the earth, and wind howling through the pines with a voice full of fury. At the edge of that wilderness, nestled between two ridgelines and surrounded by tall fir trees, sat a small log cabin, lit only by the orange flicker of a fire and the soft hum of a kettle on the stove. Claire didn't mind storms. She preferred them, in fact. The noise kept her from remembering things she wanted to forget, like silence. Like how quiet the house used to be even when it was full. She sat curled in a worn rocking chair, a book closed on her lap and a flannel blanket draped over her legs. Outside, the storm screamed. Inside, all was calm. Until she heard it. A scratching sound. Not on the floor, not from the roof, but at the door. Claire stiffened. Her hands instinctively reached for the old hunting rifle above the hearth. No one came up this far. Not neighbors. Not hikers. Certainly not during a storm like this. Then came a low, desperate whine. Like the cry of something young and scared. She slowly stood, heart thudding louder than the thunder. Peering through the peephole, she saw nothing. The lantern outside had long been knocked over by the wind. But the scratching came again, softer now. Hesitant. Against every rational instinct, Claire opened the door. 2 soaked bundles of fur collapsed onto her porch. Bear cubs. They looked no older than a few months. One was slightly bigger, fur clumped with mud and burrs. The other trembled, its eyes barely open. Both were drenched, shivering, and clearly lost. Claire froze. Her breath caught. This was dangerous, not just because of the cubs, but because where there are cubs, there's a mother. She glanced into the dark trees. Nothing. No movement. No sound except the driving rain. They whimpered. Claire's mind flashed back to another night. A different cry. The sound of a child calling for help from another room. She'd arrived too late then. Too late to stop the fever. Too late to say goodbye. Her throat tightened. I must be insane, she muttered, stepping aside. The cubs didn't hesitate. They shuffled inside, leaving muddy prints on the floorboards, dripping onto the old rug. One of them tried to climb into the armchair, but slipped and rolled onto its back. The other tucked itself near the hearth, letting out a long sigh that sounded far too human. Claire shut the door. Just like that, she had house guests. She moved slowly, cautiously. Every book she'd ever read said this was a terrible idea. They could grow aggressive. They could carry disease. And if their mother returned, God help her. But for now, all she saw were 2 terrified babies. She brought out a thick towel and began drying the smaller cub. It flinched at first, but then leaned into the warmth. She poured warm goat milk into a shallow pan and watched as the bigger one slurped eagerly, eyes wide. She didn't name them. Not yet. That would make it harder later. Claire stayed up the entire night, listening for sounds outside the cabin. She kept the rifle near, her body tense. But the storm screamed on, and no shadows moved beyond the window. As dawn broke, pink light filtered through the glass panes, touching everything with softness. The storm had passed. The cubs were still asleep, curled together like children. And Claire, against every voice in her head, felt something she hadn't in a very long time. She felt needed. The next morning, Claire awoke in her chair with a crick in her neck and 2 bear cubs still sleeping soundly near the fire. The smaller one was snoring, a soft, comical whiffle, while the larger stirred occasionally, one paw twitching in a dream. Claire rubbed her eyes, trying to remind herself that this was real. Not a dream. Not a memory. There were actual, living bear cubs in her living room. And she had let them in. She moved quietly, grabbing her old notebook and scribbling something at the top of a page. Day 1. I know this is insane. It was the same notebook she'd used years ago when she and Henry had started building the cabin. She used to track groceries, repairs, garden yields. Later, it had become a journal when things started to fall apart. And then, after her daughter Ava got sick, it was the place she poured all the things she couldn't say out loud. Today, she needed it again. The cubs woke slowly, stretching like puppies. They sniffed around the room, nosed at the firewood basket, and one even tried to paw open the kitchen cupboard. Claire poured more milk, watching them with equal parts awe and anxiety. They were hungry, curious, and far too comfortable for creatures that belonged in the wild. Don't get used to this, she warned. The smaller cub looked up, tilted its head, and let out a soft huff. Claire's heart nearly cracked. She sat down across from them, eyes misty. I used to say that to Ava too. Every time I gave in and let her sleep in my bed when she had nightmares. Her voice broke. She'd say, "Just tonight, Mama. Just tonight." The cubs didn't understand, but they didn't need to. They listened the way only animals could, with presence. By day 3, Claire had a rhythm: feed, clean, watch. She kept the cubs near the hearth, blocking off the bedrooms and kitchen with chairs and crates. She set out water, scattered fish scraps she had frozen in case of harsh winters, and even found herself humming lullabies she hadn't thought about in years. She made them a bed from old quilts. She let them nuzzle her socks. She started calling the big one Thumper, because of the way he pawed the wooden floor. The smaller one, more timid and clumsy, she named Moss. Yes, she was naming them now. Mistake number 1. That evening, Claire sat outside with her coat wrapped tight, looking toward the tree line. She told herself she was just getting some air. But in truth, she was watching. Waiting. Because no matter how strong the storm, no matter how lost the cubs seemed, they had to belong to someone. A mother bear didn't just lose 2 babies in the woods without coming back. The thought made her blood chill. She'd read stories. A mother grizzly could smell her cubs from miles away. And if she thought they were threatened? Claire glanced back at her cabin, warm, glowing, peaceful. Would the bear see it as a home? Or a trap? Back inside, Moss was curled in her lap, snoring softly. Thumper was chewing on the edge of the hearthrug. Claire didn't stop him. She closed her eyes for a moment, resting her cheek against the top of Moss's head. "Mistake number 2, she whispered. "Letting myself feel this again." But she didn't move. Because the truth was, this little chaos, the fur, the warmth, the constant need, had reawakened something in her. Something she'd thought died with Ava. Outside, a branch cracked in the forest. A deep, low breath echoed through the dark. The cub's ears twitched. And Claire suddenly remembered. The next morning brought a silence so thick it pressed against the cabin walls. Claire stood on her porch, mug in hand, steam curling into the brittle mountain air. Fresh snow had fallen overnight, a clean white sheet across the clearing, untouched and perfect, except for the tracks. Massive ones. Not like the dainty, stumbling prints the cubs made. These were deep, wide, clawed, deliberate. They circled the edge of her property. Claire's breath caught. She followed the trail with her eyes. The tracks stopped just a few yards from her porch, and turned back toward the forest. She scanned the tree line. Nothing moved. But something had definitely come. And it had watched. Inside the cabin, the cubs were unusually quiet. They didn't rush to the food dish or climb on the couch like usual. Thumper paced restlessly, sniffing at the door, while Moss sat by the window, staring out as if waiting for someone. Claire's pulse quickened. She'd known this moment was coming, the moment the forest would try to take them back. But still, she wasn't ready. The following nights brought more signs. Once she woke to the sound of heavy breathing outside her bedroom window, not human, not even close. The low, rhythmic exhale of something massive. When she peeked through the curtain, she saw nothing but the outline of paw prints in the frost. Another night, the compost bin was knocked over. Something had rummaged through the fish scraps. But whatever it was hadn't tried to enter the cabin. It hadn't tried to hurt them. It was waiting. Watching. And Claire knew exactly who it was. The mother. She wrote about it in her notebook, her handwriting growing sharper with each entry. Day 6, she came. I didn't see her, but I know. She didn't break in. She didn't try to take them. Is she testing me? Or does she trust me? She reread the line 3 times. That word, trust, startled her. Because it meant this wasn't just a standoff between woman and beast. It was something more fragile. More frightening. A negotiation. That afternoon, Claire took the cubs outside for the first time since the storm. She let them toddle around the clearing while she split firewood nearby. She watched them closely, but also watched the woods beyond. That's when she saw it. A dark shape. Low to the ground. Not moving. Barely visible between 2 trees. Too large to be anything but a bear. She froze, axe in hand. Her instinct screamed run. But she didn't. She stood tall. The mother bear didn't advance. Didn't growl. She just watched. And for a long breathless moment, Claire watched back. Then the shape disappeared into the trees like mist. That night, Claire didn't sleep. She sat near the fire with her rifle beside her, but also a bowl of berries on the porch. Crazy, she muttered. Feeding the thing that might eat me. But the next morning, the bowl was gone. Not spilled. Not smashed. Gone. And in its place? A pine branch. Perfectly laid across the porch steps. A gift? Or a message? The cubs were restless again that morning. Thumper kept trying to paw at the door. Moss whined until Claire let her nap near the woodpile, closer to the cold air. They were ready. They knew. She just hadn't accepted it yet. By midday, new prints appeared in the snow. Fresh. Heading toward the cabin this time. Claire stood at the window, heart pounding. The cubs followed her gaze. Then, out of the trees, she came. Huge. Powerful. Beautiful. The mother bear. Her fur was matted with ice. Her breath came in fogged bursts. Her black eyes didn't rage, they pleaded. She didn't growl. She didn't charge. She just stood there, waiting. And inside the cabin, Claire whispered. She came back for them. The mother bear stood motionless. She was framed by the snowy forest behind her, a giant against the trees, her fur thick and shadowed, her breath visible in the cold dawn air. Claire couldn't move. Neither could the cubs. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then Thumper let out a low, rumbling whimper. Moss responded with a high-pitched chirp. Claire felt her heart breaking and mending all at once. This was it. The moment she knew would come but still wasn't ready for. The cubs rushed to the window, their noses pressing against the glass. The mother took a small step forward, but stopped short of the porch. Claire's breath fogged the window as she watched. No claws. No charge. No warning, she whispered. She just wants them. It wasn't fear Claire felt anymore, it was reverence. The mother bear wasn't wild chaos. She was composed. Watchful. A guardian come home. Claire stepped away from the window and knelt beside the cubs. They're your babies, she murmured, not sure if she was speaking to the bear, or to herself. Thumper nosed her palm. Moss gave a small grunt and tilted her head. Claire smiled through sudden tears. You remember her, don't you? The cubs whined again, pacing near the door. She stood, her fingers trembling. Slowly, carefully, she unlatched the lock and cracked the door open just an inch. A rush of icy air swept in. The mother didn't move. Claire opened it wider. The cubs hesitated, just for a moment. Then Thumper was the first out. He bounded across the porch and into the snow, his paws making soft thuds. Moss followed slower, glancing back at Claire once before hurrying to catch up. The mother bear knelt as they reached her. She sniffed them both, grunted softly, then licked their faces in long, deliberate strokes. Claire stepped out onto the porch, the door open behind her. She watched in silence as the three bears, mother and cubs, stood together in the snow, reunited at last. But something unexpected happened next. The mother turned her head. She looked directly at Claire. Not with rage. Not with distrust. But with recognition. For a single breathless second, Claire felt, acknowledged. The bear let out one low guttural sound, more hum than growl. A thank you. Then, without another glance, the trio turned and walked back into the trees. Claire stood rooted to the spot, the wind tugging at her sleeves. The clearing emptied. The footprints slowly filled with drifting snow. And the silence returned. She went back inside. Shut the door. Sat in her chair. The house was quieter than she remembered it ever being. The spot near the fire where the cubs had curled up was now just a flattened quilt. The room felt larger, colder. She poured herself a cup of tea and stared into the flames. Something inside her cracked. And something else, something older, something dormant, healed. That evening, Claire walked out to the edge of the woods. She carried a jar of honey and a soft wool blanket the cubs had loved. She placed them gently under the pine tree. Just in case, she said. She didn't expect them to return. But they had brought something back to her she thought she'd buried long ago. The ability to care. To trust. To open the door, even when it hurt. The forest remained still. But Claire didn't feel alone. Not anymore. The days that followed were strangely still. Claire no longer woke to the sound of soft snoring beside the hearth, or the gentle chaos of Thumper pawing at her spice cabinet. The house was quiet, not empty, but echoing with memory. She didn't sweep the paw prints off the floor. Didn't wash the quilts. Didn't put the milk dish away. Letting go had never felt so much like holding on. The snow continued to fall, blanketing the cabin in white and sealing the forest behind a veil of mist. Claire went about her routine, chopping firewood, feeding the chickens, walking the ridge with her binoculars, but everywhere she looked, she half expected to see the cubs tumbling after each other. Sometimes she thought she heard them. Sometimes she hoped she didn't. Then one morning near the end of February, Claire stepped out with a basket of food scraps and saw something strange. The bowl of berries and fish she had left 3 nights ago near the pine tree was gone. In its place, 3 small rocks. Arranged in a triangle. Deliberate. She crouched, fingers brushing the stones. Her eyes welled. They came back. That night, she left a new offering: dried honeycomb, some of Ava's favorite tea biscuits, and a folded scarf the cubs used to chew on. It was gone by morning. No tracks. No sound. Just gone. And always replaced by something. A pine cone. A feather. Once, even the handle of an old cooking pan. Claire laughed aloud at that one. The forest was speaking to her. Not in words, but in rituals. A quiet exchange. Give, receive. Trust, return. In the weeks that followed, Claire found herself transformed. She repaired the broken window latch she'd ignored for years. She painted Ava's old bedroom. She even called her sister, for the first time in over a decade. "I had guests," she said. The line went silent. Then, a soft reply. "You let them in?" Claire's voice cracked. "Yes. And they let me feel again." One evening in early spring, Claire returned from the lake trail to find something waiting near the porch. It wasn't a pine cone. Or a feather. It was a fish. Fresh. Still glistening with river water. It had been laid carefully, gently, on the porch step. Claire stared at it, breath caught. Then she noticed something else. Footprints. 2 sets. Not cub-sized anymore. One smaller than the other. Thumper and Moss. Older now. Grown. Wild. But here. She walked to the edge of the trees and stood very still. Her heart thudded. A branch shifted. Something moved. And then she saw them, not clearly, not fully. Just the silhouette of 2 bears beyond the mist. Watching. Waiting. Not to come in. Just to see her. As if to say, "We remember." Claire didn't speak. She didn't need to. She nodded once, slow and full of gratitude. The shapes moved again, melting back into the forest. Claire turned to go inside, not sad, not broken. Just full. And for the first time in years, she whispered aloud in her quiet house. "Good night. Be safe." It had been nearly a year. The forest, once heavy with snow and silence, was now a riot of green and sound. Spring had poured life back into every leaf and stream. Claire's cabin stood quietly in its clearing, still weathered, still warm. Life had settled into something steady, a rhythm of peace and purpose. She kept the porch swept. She cooked simple meals. She had even started writing again. But every now and then, when twilight fell thick and gold across the trees, she'd sit in the rocker with her cup of tea, and listen. For pause. For breath. For memory. Then, on a warm June afternoon, it happened. She had just finished hanging laundry when a low, distant huff reached her ears. She froze. Not imagined. Not wind. Real. Her eyes scanned the tree line. There, emerging from the shadows, was a sight that rooted her in place. The mother bear. Slow. Enormous. Regal. And behind her? Thumper. Moss. No longer cubs. Taller now. Broader. Coats rich and healthy. But unmistakably them. Claire's breath caught as a sob rose to her throat. They remembered. The mother bear's steps were slow and deliberate. She didn't rush. didn't growl. She watched Claire, calm, cautious. Claire didn't move. She knew this was not her moment to step forward, but to bear witness. The great bear reached the edge of the clearing and paused. She turned slightly, letting Thumper and Moss step ahead, toward the porch. Claire stayed perfectly still. Moss approached first, sniffing the air, head tilted just like always. Then Thumper, slower, heavier-footed, now nearly her mother's size. They stopped a few feet away, and just looked at Claire. For a moment, time collapsed. There was no cabin, no years, no storm, no loss. Just 3 hearts, once strangers, now family, reunited in silence. Claire knelt slowly, hand to her chest. "Thank you for letting me love them," she whispered, speaking not just to the cubs, but to the mother. The bear blinked slowly. Then, to Claire's astonishment, she turned her head toward the porch. And huffed. A soft, deliberate sound. Then turned. And walked away. No claim. No threat. Just a gesture. A mother acknowledging another. The cubs followed her. Not reluctantly, but with ease. They looked back once. Claire raised her hand. "Goodbye, my babies." They disappeared into the trees. Not lost. Not gone. Just wild, as they were meant to be. Weeks passed. Claire didn't expect them to return again. But now she didn't need them to. The ache had changed. It wasn't a wound anymore, it was a warmth. A knowing. A chapter lived fully. Late one evening, a package arrived by mail. No return address. Just a simple tag that read, "For the one who understood." Inside, a sketchbook. Filled with pencil drawings. Of cubs. Of cabins. Of a woman and 2 bears curled near a fire. Claire's hands trembled as she turned the pages. The last drawing? 3 bears beneath a starry sky. And a cabin glowing softly in the background. Claire placed the book beside her chair and stepped outside. She looked at the clearing where it had all begun, where life, loss, and love had all wrapped into one impossible winter. Then she smiled. Because the forest had given her a gift. Not just 2 cubs. But healing. Purpose. And the unspoken truth. That sometimes the family we're meant for is the one we never saw coming. Sometimes, healing doesn't come in the way we expect. It arrives on 4 paws, in muddy footprints, in the soft weight of a head resting on your lap. This story isn't just about a woman and 2 bear cubs. It's about what happens when we open the door, even when we're afraid. It's about how love, in its wildest form, finds us when we need it most, and teaches us how to let go when the time is right. If you believe animals can change our lives, and maybe even save them, then you know. Some bonds never break. Even when they return to the wild.